Yes.
I can hear you, Don. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We are waiting for a couple more people to join, and then we will get started with the Probation Oversight Commission meeting. Thanks for being here today. Actually, whenever you're ready, Commissioner Carrillo, we definitely have quorum now, far beyond quorum.
Okay, great, Wendy. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 12 p.m. exactly, Thursday, June 23rd, 2022. And I'm calling to order the virtual meeting of the Los Angeles Probation Oversight Commission. My name is Frankie Carrillo, and I'm the chair of the commission. As we begin, Wendy Julian, our executive director, will explain how those of you joining us today can participate during this meeting. And then, Wendy, please call the roll.
Thank you. I don't know whether you all on the attendance side can tell this, but we have a new version of WebEx today, and some of the buttons are in a different place. So please give us a moment if it takes us a moment to get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Chair Carrillo. As always, we encourage your participation in our meeting today. Welcome your comments in writing or live. There will be an opportunity for public comment on each agenda item at the end of the agenda item, and then at the end of the meeting for items not on the agenda. So the way it's going to work is that Chair Carrillo will introduce the agenda item. There'll be a presentation, if any, and then we'll take public comment before the commission discusses the item or takes any action. The easiest way to make comment is to register in advance through WebEx, but if you haven't done that, don't worry. All you need to do is use the raise your hand function. If you click on participants, and you may have to click on the three little dots down below, and actually on my screen now, I have a little hand at the bottom of the screen, so I hope that's true for participants as well. So if you click on the little raise hand function, it will raise your hand in our queue, and we can call on you to make public comment. Then please put your hand down, and you're welcome to comment on the next item by raising your hand again. If you are calling in, you can also make public comment. The way you raise your hand if you're calling in is to dial *3 on your phone, and you also lower your hand dialing *3. So please do that after you've made your comment. All commenters today will have 2 minutes unless the chair determines otherwise based on the number of commenters signed up for each item. And if you wish to make your public comment in writing, you can send it via email to info@poc.lacounty.gov. You'll see that in the chat. Please don't send your public comments or any comments in the chat. Only the host sees it. The panelists don't see it. It will not be logged as public comment because the chat function doesn't comport with our Brown Act responsibilities. Our commission meeting is being broadcast live on Facebook today. You're welcome to watch it while we're in the meeting on Facebook Live or afterwards, but there's no engagement with users. We encourage you to follow our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at LA County POC. You'll get more information about our meetings as well as publications and other work that we're doing. Le damos la bienvenida a las personas que están con nosotros que prefieren hacer su comentario en español. Si quiere hacer su comentario en español, nomás levante su mano oprimiendo el pequeño botón que es una manita bajo la ventana de participantes. Le daremos 4 minutos para su comentario de 2 minutos y la traducción. Nosotros podemos proveer la traducción o usted puede proveer su propio traductor. Nomás avísenos cómo quiere proceder. And with that, I will now call the roll. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves and let us know you're here. Commissioner Dolores Canales.
Present, thank you.
Commissioner Danielle Dupuy.
Here.
Commissioner Sean Garcia-Lays.
Here.
Commissioner Shay Jackson.
I am here.
Commissioner Sam Lewis. So actually, I see Sam attempting to log on in the background, Janae. So can we... If you could take a look at the participant list, make sure that we can get Commissioner Lewis on board, but I will let you know, Chair Carrillo, as soon as he joins. Commissioner Don Meredith.
Here.
Commissioner Dominique Nong.
Good afternoon, present.
Commissioner Kanya Mashiro.
Here.
And Chair Frankie Carrillo.
I am here. Thank you,
Okay.
Wendy.
Thank you, Chair Carrillo, and I will pass it back over to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Wendy, once again. Now we will proceed with the remaining agenda items for today. Item number 2 is the approval of June 9th minutes. Do we have any written public comments, Wendy, or live public comments for this item?
We do not.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve June 9th minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a
Second.
motion by Commissioner Canales and seconded by, I missed that.
A second.
Don? Oh, forgive me, Garcia Lays. Are there any changes to the minutes? Okie dokie, hearing none. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves and vote with a voice vote. Aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to item number 3 is to discuss and take appropriate action on the progress the probation department has made on phasing out the use of OC spray in the LA County juvenile halls. The OC spray deployment report for May 23rd through June 12th are attached in the agenda. Chief Deputy Bettino, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Carrillo. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, as always, for having me. Just quickly want to run through a few brief updates. First, I will say that progress is frankly limited at this point in terms of the phase out. Two things that are happening. We're continuing to move forward with our academies, which are light. We don't have a lot of people in academies, which I'll get into in a moment. But those folks graduating will not be issued OC. So we've done that successfully with, I believe, two classes prior to this one. So they'll need to be trained on decontamination because OC is still obviously in the facilities, but they won't be issued OC once they hit the line. So part of the guidance that we've received is to try to phase out on the front end and then also begin phasing out on the back end, start to remove it from staff so that there's some meeting in the middle. One of the things that must happen here for us is to take another look at the plan that we submitted to the board back in 2019. It's 3 years old. One of the things that we want to look really closely at, if folks have read that, and I don't know if all the commissioners have seen that, there's a really in-depth analysis of what staffing patterns may look like in lieu of OC. So, one of the conversations that we constantly have with our staff is, if we remove OC, what are we actually providing for folks? And the rationale, part of the rationale was staffing. So increased numbers of both probation staff. And then another huge ask was for mental health staff. I believe both requests were somewhere near 30 million each. And so I think ultimately became cost prohibitive, and the board did not award us with those staffing numbers, neither probation nor mental health. So we need to take another look at it because given the caseloads, given the, both in the field and in detention, if we look at the trajectory of the number of young people we have, I think the staffing request is different. It certainly is modified. The other thing that I think the old plan doesn't consider is collaboration with community-based organizations who may be able to come in and complement, the work that our probation staff are doing. This is very much in alignment too with, at least our thinking is shifting and trying to be in alignment with some of the work that we're doing around the SYTF population, what services and supports actually exist out there to complement the work that probation staff may be able to do, or mental health staff for that matter. So it really needs more work and it needs a revise. And so we've had some discussions as a leadership team about how to move forward with that. The first part is to unpack what's there and to see which parts of it, frankly, are still relevant. I don't know how much the plan aligns with, with the Care First reforms that this county is undergoing. And so we do need to take a closer look at that. The other thing that I want to mention that's pertinent here is our use of force policy is complete and has been issued as of yesterday. At this point, it's public record. Happy to share with the commissioners. Wendy will share that with your team shortly here. And some of the questions that have come up, Ms. Gama had sent this morning, unfortunately, so I doubt that many of the commissioners got a chance to see it, but some of the drill down questions that were asked about specific incidents, like end of May, early June, some of that information was provided along with some of the the actual reports of the incidents, which are obviously redacted for obvious reasons. But in the drill down and in some of the specific questions that you asked, the policy does address some of those things. So two major things that I wanted to bring up. One is the debriefing protocols that were asked about. Questions about, are we debriefing after these incidents? Are we talking with staff? Are we ensuring that the young people are okay? And not only that medically that they've been cleared by a nurse, but that that there's some conversation with mental health about, you know, what occurred. Similarly for our staff, in the event that our staff are assaulted or anything like that, are we following up with them to make sure that they're okay? But then the larger debriefing about what preceded the incident, what could have been done differently, how did we get to this point? So that's all in the policy. I will say practice, you know, as often as the case is lagging behind a little bit, but it is something that folks are aware of, and I think with our new bureau chief over detention and the new superintendents, it's something that's being looked at a lot more closely. Because we're aware that these incidents need to be debriefed. Part of the reason there too is to ensure that that folks are getting coaching when they need coaching, additional training when they need additional training on what to do and where to be prior to any of these incidents. The other thing that was asked about specific incidents and specific staff. So one of the things that probation does have at our disposal is an early intervention system. The early intervention system, as it existed before, has limited utility. To be honest, I think I'm not sure how often folks are actually looking at it. What it is it essentially shows who was involved, which staff members were involved in certain incidents. It also highlights young people who are involved in multiple incidents, but primarily it should be used as a coaching and a training tool by our supervisors and managers, because it tracks who responds and how they respond. So our Systems Accountability Bureau has taken some major strides, in fact, to revise this tool. It's currently kind of going through one last iteration of some revision, because we want to make sure that it provides as much utility as possible. What it will tell supervisors and managers is our staff person responding to more incidents than his or her peers? That may just be that they are proactive and they're responding, so that's not necessarily a negative thing. When they respond, how do they respond? So if they're in the unit, for example, and something happens, there's a rating scale that actually will tell us, did they respond with a higher use of force than their peers, or a lower level use of force than their peers? So it will show kind of any kind of skewing of numbers, highlighting whether or not our staff are engaging too little or too much, and if that makes sense. It's something we would really like to share with this commission once we have some of the kinks worked out. We've had some demos for executive leadership, and really think that this new version of the early intervention system will tell us a lot about what's actually going on in the facilities. Our data is improving to the point where we can drill down to a specific incident and determine what preceded and what action was taken after the fact. This is good. We're going to need to put some policy in place here. Part of the struggle, I think, with the old early intervention system is that the policy didn't support our staff, and so there's a fear that it's used in a punitive fashion. That's absolutely not the intent. Now, I won't say that it may result in discipline if folks are in fact violating policy on a repeat basis, but it much more than that. It should be used as a coaching tool and as a training tool to identify if folks need some sort of remediation, then we can focus on that. And the last thing that I want to share on this front is just something that may come up, and I know Chief Fletcher is on as well. We continue to struggle with staffing in our institutions. So all of this, movement towards phasing out getting people trained. We are still doing our block week training. We're still moving people through that. It's really difficult to pull anybody offline at the moment when we're struggling so much with staffing. There's a lot of steps that we've taken to try to get people back to work. We're working closely with Department of Human Resources to really focus, really, because some of these are HR related, to be honest. Do we have enough payroll staff? Do we have enough folks focused on disability management and bringing people back to work? Things like that. So just to be, to put it out there as something that has been shared again, we continue to struggle with staffing, which makes it difficult to move forward in any firm direction on this at the moment. So I'll stop there without getting into like specific questions, but I just wanted to kind of share some of the things that are going on in the background, and we'll be certain to share the policy with you all, the use of force policy with you all following this meeting. So obviously open to questions, comments.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments for this item?
We do. We have one person pre-registered. That is Miguel Lugo, and we will call on him first. And then if you'd like to make public comment, please click on the raise your hand function. Janae, will you let me know once our first speaker is unmuted?
So Miguel, the request has been sent. Please accept it and begin your public comment.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Miguel Lugo. This was put in law, and what I see here is that the law is being broken by peace officers that's supposed to hold the law. Pepper spray. I'm one of those kids that actually went through the system. They got pepper spray myself as a kid and as an adult. It's a form of child abuse. It's trauma that we have to deal with for the rest of our lives after we leave incarceration and reentry now into society. I want to make sure that none of our kids are getting child abuse or getting harmed, not only physically but mentally by not only staff but people that are misusing this. And as a reentry person from incarceration, I'm a law. I follow the law by the book now, and I expect the people that are holding the law, the people that hold me accountable as a kid, to obey the law, not to be breaking the law. I don't understand why parents are not putting lawsuits yet. To really, it's been a law since the first 2019. 2019, it became law. What is going on that the law is being broken and we're still talking about it here like if it's something that we need to fix? What we need to do is get rid of it, and we need to get into the real talk about being trauma informed. And if people are not ready to work in this department, maybe they were not meant to work in this department. And I'm pretty sure that we got a lot of people that are qualified to work and to be trauma informed when they're dealing with our kids. Because if I were to go to your home and pepper spray your kid for talking back to me, you will have me arrested. So I don't understand why are the officers not being arrested? Why are the probation officers not being charges on it, not being pressed towards them? So please, I would like to have an answer as a community member, please.
Thank you, Miguel. Thanks for being in the meeting today. Next up, we have Melinda Kakani. Millie, you can begin. There we go.
Hello?
The unmuting process is now a two-step process. Sorry, Millie, for cutting you off. So we will send you a request to unmute, and then you have to unmute yourself, which Millie just figured out. But it's changed a little bit with the new format of WebEx for those of you who are regular commenters. Go ahead, Millie.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, this is Millie Kakani with Children's Defense Fund California and the Los Angeles Youth Uprising Coalition. Thank you, Miguel, for your incredible comments as a community member. I don't know how else to underscore that the use of OC spray is nothing short of child abuse, and the fact that there are people who are charged with caring for these young people who use this on a regular basis and don't have their essentially jobs terminated because a parent's rights would be terminated if they did something similar. Additionally, I just wanted to comment on the fact that Mr. Bettino stated they needed to revisit this plan that was devised in 2019. Yes, a motion was passed in 2019 to eliminate the use of OC spray Yes, we are 3 years out from that plan, and that probation suddenly decides that they need to revisit is just unacceptable. The fact is that the youth to staff ratio is smaller than it has ever been. And the fact also remains that probation's budget is larger than it has ever been as it relates to the amount that is spent on incarcerating a young person per year. If you can't figure out how to get it right with $1 million per kid, then there is no fixing this system. And finally, I just wanted to question the veracity of the documents that were provided by probation. As we know, the BSCC recently found Central Juvenile Hall unsuitable for the confinement of youth because documents did not align with video footage. So how is it that we can sit here and trust these documents when there hasn't been further investigation as to whether or not video footage confirms what is documented here? It all just leaves a bad taste in one's mouth when there is like absolutely no ability to trust what is shared. So I do hope that the Probation Oversight Commission takes a closer look at, again, what has been shared and whether there is corroboration for that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be a call-in user. You're listed as call-in user number 7, and your phone begins with 323471. We're going to unmute you. Janae, do you know on the phone if they need to do something in particular to unmute themselves?
Yes, they have to dial *6 to unmute.
Okay.
To accept the request.
So
There it goes.
try dialing *6.
Okay, could
There
you
we go.
guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hello. My name is Sherry Richardson. I've been a probation officer for 20 years. I have never worked with a probation officer that came in to physically harm any of the youth. The issues have been, we've been assaulted quite a bit, and it goes unstated, unnoticed, unknown. Maybe probation officers, didn't want to be exposed or known that happens. But for the most part, the pepper spray is normally used for defense or fighting or the assault. It has never been, in my opinion, used to abuse any children. It's kind of odd that we come in as probation officers to do a job, work and go to college and do what we do. However, there are some probation officers that may not have done what was right, but then we're all held accountable for that. There are a lot of probation officers that love and respect and want to help these kids, but that goes unnoticed. Probation officers are not what people have coined them to be. And as a youth, I don't know what happened when he was in camp or what happened, but I apologize for the probation department if that happened to him. But I don't believe in my heart that people come in there to abuse children. When they fight, when they assault us, when they do all those things, that's swept under the rug. Nobody wants to talk about that. But it's not fair to the probation officers that come in and give 1,000% of their time, talk to the kids, love the kids, work with the kids, and do their very best. And all they're asking for with pepper spray, for the most part, is some type of defense to protection for themselves. Because maybe
that's your time, Sherry. Thank you for joining us today. Next up, we have Krista Newble. Krista, we're going to unmute you. And you can begin. Krista, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, I am muted. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to address a few comments that were said earlier and make something clear. Number one, we don't pepper spray kids for talking back. Number two, I just want to revisit something as far as pepper spray is concerned. They don't do this in the training now, but when I was in training and for the 10 years I was in the camps, when we were trained, we were actually pepper sprayed in the face. And they did that to show you what it felt like to be pepper sprayed. And that, having that done to you made you think twice about pulling that. In the 10 years I was in the camp, I may have pulled my pepper spray 3 times. Twice was in a riot, and once was a very bad fight in a restroom that was out of control. Those are 3 times in 10 years, and I've worked everywhere in almost every camp and facility. Pepper spray is not the first thing that we ever went to, and I know pepper spray is not even should even be a topic because we already know the motion has been passed. But when people say it's been 3 years, they're just pulling it out, they're just doing whatever, it's child abuse. We don't just pull it out. You have to look at, even though the population is smaller, you have to look at the type of kids. Yes, they are kids. They are minors, they are youth, they are just as informed youth, you know, that we're servicing now. We're not servicing the same type of children that we were servicing before. You have to look at the incidents that are happening. You have to take a really good look at that and why the pepper spray is being used. Not just saying it's being used because they just want to pull it out and just spray kids and do child abuse. There are reasons why this pepper spray was being used, and the reasons why it went up. If you're gonna say it went up, look at why it went up. What was happening? What was happening? What was the use of it? You have to cite those things without saying those sentences and just not having the proof of it and what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Next up is call-in user number 5. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Call-in user number 8. Your number starts with 323-353. So we're unmuting you on our side and you dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Sorry, Wendy, the request was sent to calling user 5. They're already unmuted.
Oh,
Would you mind-
okay. Call-in user 5, your number starts with 951. You can begin.
Good afternoon. I actually have questions. Mr. Bettino spoke of the academies that have been completed, plus the current one are not being trained using OC. What methods are they being trained with in lieu of the replacement? And also, he talked about additional staff. I thought there was already a staffing shortage. So how can that be resolved if you're already short-staffed and now you're talking about trying to add additional, including mental health workers? How is that being addressed if the board did not approve it from last time around? There has to be an alternative suggestion. So I'm curious to know what that suggestion or what those alternatives will be for the youth and to keep everyone, both youth and probation officers, safe. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Janae, can we go back to the other call-in user? I believe it was call-in user 8 to see if they want to make a comment. Your number starts with 323-353. You're unmuted. Go ahead. Try to say something again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can. You may begin.
How you guys doing? I'm currently a probation officer. Been a probation officer for 16 years, and I want to piggyback off of some that the other probation officers were talking about in terms of the pepper spray. The pepper spray is needed basically because the assaults and the volatile minors that we're acquiring today within the units are is kind of like unprecedented. The OC spray should always be a last use of resort. So if you have an incident in the unit where you're using an SEM crisis and you're getting a kid is getting 3 or 4 kids is assaulting another minor, the pepper spray is the last resort for the safety of the minor and the safety of the staff. I've seen within the last 3-4 years, within the last 6 months, several officers get assaulted. Some of them that came in off a deployment that didn't have pepper spray, that left and didn't make it home to their families. So the pepper spray usage is not, it never should be the first line of defense, but it's definitely needed to help secure a situation or a unit disturbance that's pretty much out of control. That's pretty much my time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Eric Walton. Eric, you are not yet unmuted, but we'll get you there. Okay, so you can unmute yourself and begin.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to just clarify a few things. Um, the pepper spray in our institutions is one of the most regulated uh, items that we have in our department. There are very serious of steps that has to be done before you can deploy. And you can't just deploy pepper spray if a young person is talking back or just being verbally disrespectful or anything of that nature. It's against policy. Officers are disciplined for any way, shape, or form of violating that policy, if not using it under protocol. Um, what we are experiencing in our institutions, as other officers have stated, is unprecedented. I believe since the POC has subpoena powers or anything of that nature, I believe it possibly be necessary that if you all collaborate with the department and actually see the video footage of multiple youth attacking more than one youth at a time, or unprovoked attacks with chairs on officers, where officers have to go to emergency and get stitches. I believe you all need to be able to review this video to see the numerous disturbances that are erupting inside the institution, so you can actually see that one or two officers cannot stop the physical, brutal violence that young people are committing against either each other or an officer. And I'm talking about unprovoked, where there's a situation where it's not provoked. And a lot of times camp has been used as an example of no pepper spray, but just be mindful. When I first got hired, I got called out of juvenile hall to Kilpatrick, to where a large scale riot erupted, where the sheriffs had to come out and use non-lethal force and pepper ball pellets. So it can also happen in camp where law enforcement has to come in.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. Next up, we have Jose Osuna. Jose, we're going to unmute you. And you can unmute yourself and begin.
Can you all hear me?
I can hear you now. You can begin. Jose, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I want to make a couple of comments. And I truly do not mean any disrespect to the probation department and its staff with these comments, but I keep hearing a mindset around OC pepper spray still being an option. I was part of the probation reform and implementation team. That was the first body that came up with a plan. Obviously, that plan was scrapped for the elimination of pepper spray. Probation has come up with its own plan, and now we're talking about another plan being developed. I really would love for all of us to get to a place where the mindset, especially for some of the probation officers that I heard on the call today, being about how do we get beyond seeing pepper spray as an option, because as one of the probation officers stated, it shouldn't be an option anymore. The motion was passed over 3 years ago now. I'd love to see more training for current POs. If we're doing training for folks in the academy around not being able to use pepper spray and finding other alternatives to dealing with these situations, then I'd love to see that expanded for all of probation staff. I'd also like to remind the probation officers that we are aware of the incidents that involve uh, juveniles and the violence that happens within the facilities. But let's remember that probation reform came about because of incidents involving violence and sexual assaults committed by probation officers. Yet we're not continuing to bring that up in these conversations. We're looking to get beyond that as community members and as folks that work for organizations that are making an attempt to work with probation to make sure that the motion that was passed once and finally gets implemented into these facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Osuna. Next up, we have Leah Zeidler-Ordaz. Leah, you're unmuted, and now you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Leah Zeidler-Ordaz from UCLA Law's Criminal Justice Program. And I think my comments are really going to echo the last caller. We are at a point where the motion was passed in 2019, probation has had that amount of time to come up with a comprehensive plan to phase out OC spray. The fact that there are probation officers calling in to justify the continued use of OC spray is extremely concerning to me. And I do agree that there needs to be some sort of departmental transformation in terms of mindsets, in figuring out how to deal with crisis situations in youth that does not involve the use of force. Because as other callers have stated, the mere use of pepper spray itself, no matter what the reasoning behind it, is child abuse. It's harmful, it's painful. If you felt it before, you know it's incredibly dehumanizing. Secondly, to the probation officers who have said that there needs to be a lot of justification and evaluation before usage, I'm looking at the data that was provided before the meeting. And unfortunately, we only have data for 2 6-day periods in May. It would be great to get data from March until the present as well. We need more information. But even with the information we have, within a 6-day time span of the first week, there was 4 uses of pepper spray. Within the next 6 days, there were 7 uses. To me, that doesn't seem like there's any real thought behind, the usage of the spray because it's being used so often. And that's a question that should be asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Thomas. That's the only name I see. We're going to unmute you. And let's see. Thomas? Oh, you're not unmuted yet. Okay, you're unmuted. You can unmute yourself and begin. Thomas, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, you can begin.
First of all, I want to thank all my colleagues for coming for speaking. I think that's what we need more of. Online staff giving their thoughts and opinions on what's going on. Second of all, I just want to say that I was at the other meetings, the one that helped create the probation commission, and one of the reasons why their pepper spray thing fell through, because like I said before, it doesn't help on what to do when the pepper spray is gone. Everything just says take it out, take it away, but never says what do we do next. I never worked the halls, but I'm at camp now, and we're receiving a lot of kids that came from the halls. That was part of Silmar and hopping on the roofs and doing all this other stuff. And we understand what they're going through down there. We don't have pepper spray in the camps. And now when we get in the restraint, we have to make our own SEM. We have to make one where we're making sure the person we're restraining is okay and secure and that we're okay. But we also have to have people stand back because these kids feel like they have to jump in. So if you got 3 people, you got 13 kids trying to jump in and help out his friend, that puts us in danger. We don't have pepper spray. So we have to figure something out, because as a camp worker, I feel like I understand what's going on in the halls, and they got to deal with a whole lot more than what we have to deal with. So if you get, I already know pepper spray has been voted out by the Board of Supervisors, not by the law, which one gentleman was saying. It wasn't the law that voted it out. It was the Board of Supervisors. So we do have to figure out another way to deal with it, but we have to do it safely. Most people just want to just throw it away, get away with it today. And that's not helping nobody. That's going to make the situation dangerous. It's going to take more staffing away from the halls because people aren't going to show up. You don't show up if it's not safe. So I really just...
Mr. Bell, you're going to have to trust me that I set the timer in the background, and I think we've gone a little over the 2 minutes, but thank you for being here today. And we're going to go on to our final, no, we've got 2 more. Call-in user number 19. Your number starts with 310245. We will unmute you, and then you dial *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, you're unmuted.
Okay.
So if you dial, okay, great, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the time. Julian, this is Mel Bailey. I have a 24-year career with the LA County Probation Department. I just want to echo a couple of sentiments. While I professionally am forced to accept the decision of the Board of Supervisors, I understand where we stand. However, it's very disheartening when I'm hearing certain comments that are being made. I just want to offer a minute of foundation. Within my career, I've actually used my pepper spray only twice. Once for a sexual assault, once when a kid had knocked out another kid and was beating his head against the toilet. Now, my question is, well, not my question, my comments are this. Similar to what someone said earlier, in our training, we were pepper sprayed. The last thing we ever wanted to do was pepper spray anyone. Nobody wanted to do that. No one wants to, in today's probation, I think there may need to be an assessment done of what follow the pepper spray, the utilization of pepper spray. It's not just spray a kid and walk off. There's a lot that goes behind it. Nobody wants to do that. So it's real disheartening to hear that people are coming to work, or at least the thought process that we're coming to work wanting to do that. Nobody wants to do that. We all took this job because we care about kids. What I would ask is, what do you do? What words would you use when you have someone who has knocked out another justice-involved youth and is banging his head against the toilet? What magic words would you use? And again, I understand, I professionally accept the decision of the board. However, the reality is, what magic words would you use when someone has knocked someone out and is pounding their head on the ground? If that were your child, what would you want to be done? And it's really hard to hear people say that we're coming to work wanting to hurt kids. That's the absolute last thing that any of us would ever want to do. And when kids feel safe, they respond better. And so that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you for the space.
Thanks, Mr. Bailey. Our last speaker will be Ryondell Bourne. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak now.
I actually wasn't going to comment on this, but I just had to after hearing everybody, especially the probation officers. I don't understand, why it is we're even having this discussion. I mean, we're talking about kids, right? So if you're an adult and you can't overpower a kid, right? Or if there's multiple of you and all of y'all can't overpower some kids, then you in the wrong line of work. You know what I'm saying? Period. Like, there should not be pepper spray used on any minor whatsoever, no matter what. You know what I'm saying? Unless this minor is about to commit a murder or whatever, pepper spray should be the last resort. You know what I'm saying? There's enough manpower from you guys' budget. From what I can see, there's enough manpower to take on these kids. So, this is all blasphemy talk. You know what I'm saying? Just pepper spraying kids. This should be unacceptable. And that's why we need to start funding creditable sources like the DYD and YJR so that this wouldn't happen. We wouldn't even be having this discussion about kids banging other kids' heads against the toilets. You know what I'm saying? If that was my kid, and my kid's head's been banging against the toilet, I would want you to get that other kid, grab him up, snatch his ass up, and hem him up real quick. You ain't got to pepper spray him. You ain't got to bang his head against the toilet like he just did my kid, but snatch him up. Let him know this is not okay. You feel me? But adding more harm and trauma with the pepper spray, you can blind that kid. Pepper spray can blind people. I wouldn't even want nobody to do that to me in training. I don't want to get pepper sprayed. I don't want to get tased. I don't want to know how that feels. Period. You feel me? So y'all need to rethink what y'all saying, because I'm hearing this coming from adults, and all of you are older than me. I can tell you that right now. I'm the youngest person probably in here. You feel me? So, I need to really rethink that. And like I said, fund the DYD, like right now.
Thank you, Mr. Bourne, and I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Carrillo. That's the end of public comment.
Thank you, Wendy, and thanks everyone for calling in. I'm looking over at the participants panel here. Any raised hands? Commissioners, have any questions or comments? Please raise your hands. I'll call on you. And while I'm waiting for hands to come up, let me ask you, Adam, you're combining or you're mixing topics here with, or maybe you're just connecting these dots here that I find a little surprising. The use of OC spray and people not coming to work. So a lot of the comments from the probation side that called in indicate to me that it sounds like there's like one adult per unit or one adult around children. Maybe that's a little extreme where I'm taking it, but are you suggesting that there's just not enough staff to even control a unit, and so when something does happen, staff members all alone? Or give me a little bit more to try to help me understand that.
Sure. Thanks, Chair Carrillo. And I don't mean to combine. I think specifically when we talk about training that's required to phase this out responsibly, that's really why I raised the issue of staffing. We know that we've seen an uptick, though, in youth on youth violence. We've seen an uptick in staff assaults. We're digging through some data now that we should be able to share that highlights some of those things. We're trying to do some drill down on those specific incidents. So I think when you talk about eliminating a tool that unfortunately, our staff has become accustomed to using, it's been in the halls now for many, many years, to move immediately towards removing something like that when we know we have these other struggles, puts a heavy burden on our staff who are on the line. Some of the things that we are hearing in conversations that we're having with the line staff, Chief Fletcher has done some surveying of staff. She's done some town halls with staff. We are hearing about safety concerns. We are hearing about some of the violence that is happening, some of the fights that are happening between the young people and the assaults that are happening on our staff. So I don't mean to merge the two things, but when we do talk about phasing out this tool, we do need to address and start to be concerned about the staffing, because even the training component, right? So to answer some of the questions that were raised, some of the things that we've been thinking through, some of the things that we have implemented, there's more trauma-informed care training that's being provided, not by probation staff, but by our partners. So UCLA is providing us with trauma-informed care training, heavy emphasis on de-escalation and all the things that means. Essentially, that means when you start your shift, when you come on to the unit, what does de-escalation look like? Are you building rapport with young people? You know, but again, if there's no other staff there in the unit, if there's one or two staff only and things turn sideways, it makes it really difficult to rely on your partners and things like that. So the call outs, Chair Carrillo, honestly, it continues to be a really big issue for us, and we're trying to mitigate it. I was speaking mainly for this plan to continue to phase it out and how it continues to put a burden on our staff, because we want to make sure that we're replacing this with something. And if I may, you know, some of the public comments, I want to be really clear. 2 points. This assertion that we're abusing kids I think is unfair. We've had incidents where we've had staff who have maybe misused spray. Those folks were terminated, and in some cases there were charges filed against those people. And 2, this assertion that we are falsifying documents, that the data that we're sharing here with the commission is somehow false or incorrect or inaccurate on purpose, intentionally. I just reject that. So, you know, forgive me, but, you know, I feel like that I needed to speak into those 2 matters there. And I hope I answered your question, Chair Carrillo.
You did, but you also caused me to think about a bunch of other ones. But I see Commissioner Dupui's hand up. So Commissioner Dupuis, you're up. We can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I'm, you know, thank you for the presentation, and thank you callers and the public for your comments. You know, this has been such a long-standing issue. It's difficult to know like how to push us forward even more than all the steps that have already been taken. I hear the concerns of both the staff and of course the young people. And I'm wondering if probation has looked into places that don't use OC spray around their training and programs. Because I mean, like kind of synthesizing everything that was said, it feels like some probation officers, they're really don't know what to do in extreme situations, aside from using pepper spray, partially probably because that's how they were trained, right? And we're talking about how we're training folks not to use pepper spray now, but I'm not sure how successful those new methods have been, the uptake of them with the new training cohorts. I'm curious about kind of that whole spectrum of alternatives and how thoroughly we've actually tried to go in a different direction.
I think that's a really fair question, Commissioner Dupuy, and I think, admittedly, we did have some momentum with training. We did have some momentum in working towards a plan to phase out. Back in 2019, we had a change of administration, and to be totally frank, a change in philosophy from the top. And then COVID hit. And so there was a huge delay in our ability to train folks because, again, the need to really have a replacement, not an additional tool, but some training, some additional supports for staff and for young people. Because I think what we recognize is that this thing, the immediacy of a spray, there's some build up to this moment that happens, and I don't. One of the things that we really want to reinforce with our folks is all the things that led to this moment, and that's where the de-escalation starts earlier, building rapport with young people starts earlier, programming, all the things that have been highlighted here that we are really working towards improving. All of that plays a role there, and trying to make sure that we're being very thoughtful about how we solidify. We've had conversations with other jurisdictions who don't use it. There are other probation departments up and down the state who do not have spray. In fact, and I failed to mention this, the DOJ response, our response to the DOJ and the monitor assumes that OC is going to be phased out, and in fact calls for it to be phased out. Our monitor has successfully phased OC out in other jurisdictions. So we're looking to him as well to provide guidance about what lessons have been learned. The timing of this right now, honestly, when our folks continually tell us, I'm not coming to work because I don't feel safe, and then we move towards taking this tool, all of that is in the air, all of it. Our desire to move in this direction, it's a board directive, and we have not complied with it. And then, the circumstances surrounding what it looks like in the current climate make for a really challenging implementation process.
Yeah, I understand that. And also I want to really, I feel like there's a lack of a holistic view about what it is that precipitates incidences where OC spray is used. To your point about what's everything that comes beforehand, part of it is the environment, right? I think a lot of the things that are proposed in YJR about how young people should be treated in the environments that they need to thrive play into the things that precipitate the use of OC spray. So they should be actively considered as a solution for how to stop using OC spray. I see Commissioner Nong's hand up, and without going into full conversation about it now, I really would love to encourage us. I don't know how best to do that, but would look to the other commissioners for their thoughts and how we can activate some of the recommendations of YJR within probation now as a method to reduce, if not eliminate, OC spray, because it should have been gone, forever ago, right? And so again, let us know, or let's put our heads together about how to end this as soon as possible. And I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you. Commissioner Nung, you're up.
Thank you. I have a few questions and a few comments, and I'm going to apologize. I lost internet for a bunch of this, but I checked, and so I don't think I'm being repetitive. But I apologize in advance if I am. One, I just wanted to respond to at least a couple of the public comments I heard specifically from the probation officers, and wanted to assure that right now data is being shared on assaults, attempted assaults on staff. So those aren't intentionally, we're actually trying to bring those out more. So that's not something that's being kept under the rug. And we have been asking for more information to get more context about what's happening with these incidents. So we are trying to get more understanding to get a more full picture. So I just want to at least try to assure staff that that's what we're trying to do right now, and are in conversations with probation, with the department, about how to get that information. And it sounds like we got some of that this morning. I also just want to look forward. I think there's a lot of frustration with the timeline. But looking forward, I will say, Mr. Patino, I'm happy to hear that the early intervention system is being revised. I am excited to see it. I'm sure we all are. Just had a question. You had mentioned specifically the ability to look at, which staff and which youth are involved, but I was wondering if the tool is also able to monitor patterns in like the time of day or like location. I know looking at and speaking to other states that could be indicative of maybe things are happening because there's no programming that's happening at like a specific hour. I'm seeing your head nod, so I'm hoping that means it's a yes.
So yeah, one of the ways that we're drilling down to the specific incidents is exactly what you laid out. So looking at like the early in the morning, transitioning. I know some kids have a hard time moving from one thing to the next. So that's one area that we've already circled. And then afternoon, evening, which I think speaks to your point about programming and what's going on during the non-school hours. So there's already a couple of areas that we've started to see, areas and locations that are definitely something to circle and notice. And then there's some drilling down that's happening there.
Great. I appreciate that. I also realize I'm off camera, but also because of internet issues. With regards to the timeline for review, again, surprised that it's being brought up now because I think it's been discussed before and it's been 3 years. But I just wanted to ask for this new review taking place, and I'm glad the DOJ monitor is involved because of their experience in other states. And there was a lot of work done in that initial plan about talking to other states as well. But could you give us a sense of both who's going to be involved in the review and the timeline for actually completing it?
So we sort of just are going to unpack it internally for now, and then there has to be a lot more conversation with our partners, certainly those who are, LACO, DMH, and others who were involved in the original planning. We're open to suggestions about who else could be involved in those conversations, but really need to, again, it's a long time coming. Need to take a close look at that to see, again, what is still relevant and what are some areas that we missed. One of the areas we know that we can do a better job of is highlighting those community partners who are already working in our institutions and how can they assist us in providing, extra set of hands and eyes and support to the young people and to the staff.
But I appreciate that. What's your timeline for this review?
Difficult to answer now. We're going to start looking through this in the next couple of weeks. So I don't know if I can provide like a hard and fast timeline. We'd like to have something done within a matter of weeks, so that it needs to go to the board as well, because we need to, as it stands now, the only thing that we've been reporting back on, or we're asked to report back on, is the training and how often we're providing training to folks, but we need to provide something to them that's a bit more substantive. I think we should be able to have a revised version of a plan that we can share with partners in a matter of weeks.
Thank you. I also just wanted to, I appreciate you being able to answer, I think, some of, frankly, the staff's questions about the alternatives. And it just made me, because we've seen and heard about this, I just wonder if it might be indicative of a greater need for internal communication, because this has been going on for so long. So the fact that the same questions are being asked is a little concerning to me, but I know that there's other commissioners who are working on internal structures and communication, but I just wanted to flag that. And I just wanted to, I can't help it, is when it came to the claim about sort of the integrity or of the documents being, I don't think anyone was saying that they were intentional, but that reference, the issue of documentation by staff maybe being incorrect and not reflecting what is actually happening was actually documented in a BSCC report. And of course, it had to do with safety checks and specifically in Central, but I just want to flag that, and it is something that I do plan to raise later on. But I just wanted to provide clarification because it wasn't in this context that the claim was being made.
Thank you, Commissioner Nunn. Commissioner Meredith, you're up.
Yeah, I understand this issue has been going on a while between pepper spray, no pepper spray, etc. Also, the assaults on staff and the assaults on youth. And my question is, and I've asked this before for a report going back to January on the number of assaults that have occurred in the facilities on staff and on the youth on youth violence, youth and staff violence. I've yet to see that report, so I'm going to modify this in the form of a motion that, again, I'm going to request a report from the department that between January and we'll say June 10th as a cutoff date, like a report on all assaults that have occurred on staff or on youth in that time period, the significance of it. Was it a minor injury or a serious injury? Because I learned there was just a serious injury assault the other day to staff. And then just to get a picture of what really has occurred. I know we're talking about pepper spray, looking at alternatives, but I'm really concerned that we don't have a real grasp on the number of assaults that are occurring. So I'm going to make a motion that a report be made documenting that information from January to June 10th, all assaults on staff or on youth in that time period, and what facility it occurred at.
I second that motion, Commissioner Jackson, if I'm able to.
Was that just a request or?
Well, I want to make it in the form of a motion because I've been requesting this for months and months and months. So actually, I want to make it in the form of a motion with a due date by the second meeting of July. That way I have a due date on it, because I understand allegedly county council might be reviewing my first request. I don't know why, because it's public information. We're not asking for names or identifiers. We're asking for a specific statistic, and that is public information. It has to be reported to DOJ every year.
Okay,
so my motion is to get those statistics from January to June 10th on how many assaults on staff or youth in our facilities. And the significance, was it a simple assault or was it an aggravated assault with injury, as may have occurred recently at one of the facilities?
Thank you, Donna. That was seconded by Vice Chair Jackson. And maybe if we should open this up for discussion.
Wait, I just wanted some clarity. Don, did that include youth on youth assaults or just youth to staff assaults? The data for that.
Yeah, it's youth on youth assaults, youth on staff assaults, any of the assaults that have occurred in our facilities, period.
Okay.
You know, actually, before we open it, well, I wasn't expecting a motion right now, but Commissioner Garcia, is this in relation to what Don is talking about or something separate?
No, I'd like to discuss this motion.
Okay, perfect. So we should open this up for discussion now. So go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Thanks. I think it's a great idea. There are a couple things I'd like to add, nothing I'd like to take away. One is that the report also include uses of force by staff. I know not everybody's going to want to define all uses of force as assaults, so that it also include those. That it be broken down by week and not by month. And that it also include population numbers. I, for one, am interested in seeing percentages. You know, I would expect that populations are high for the number of incidents to go up and the population to be lower for there to be fewer incidents. So I'd like to see those numbers, you know, right there so that I can make those connections. So those are suggested amendments, Dawn, that you can take or reject.
I agree with those.
Second that, Vice Chair.
Absolutely. It looks like Wendy has her hand up though, so I wanted to get her input before.
I see it. Yep. Wendy.
Just a clarification that we do receive the daily population reports. So I'll work with Ms. Gama to get the information, but that is information we're currently receiving.
Commissioner Nunn.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask about this motion. I'm going to need support from others on how to word it, but I just want to clarify what we mean by data, because what I'm concerned about is I don't want it to just be numbers, because as a lot of people have said, including staff and community members, that doesn't tell the full story, and we need to know the context. So what I did last week was whenever I saw numbers, which is what we're getting now on OC spray incidents, I wanted to know, and I think we all need to know more details about it, because right now the categories are pretty vague, like disruptive behavior, attempted assaults on staff, things like that. So I'm not sure if it's access to related redacted incident reports. I know that's a lot. I don't know if there's enough staff, so that's where I'm asking for support on how we do that. But I would like to not just have numbers without additional context behind them.
I think that's a great idea. Adam, maybe this is more for you. Do you think this is something that we can we can ask for it, obviously, but on your end, I know the issue with staff, and we're asking for maybe I'm not sure it's a mini report or some incident report that can be attached to it. That is more than just, as Commissioner Young is saying, just the numbers.
Mm-hmm. So I'm actually texting with Jessica on the side. I thought that we were providing some of this information already, but I don't know for certain. So in terms of, not to answer the question with a question, but it really depends on the level of detail. So we can certainly provide, as Commissioner Meredith laid out, the numbers themselves. And then what we can do is, similar to what we've done with some of the OC incidents, specific OC incidents, we'd have to drill down to the incident itself, which is a little bit more problematic. That would take a lot of time. It's similar to requests that, in fact, OIG has made, wanting to know each of the incidents and how to drill down to that. So I think we would need to put our heads together to figure out exactly how you would want all that, because I don't imagine, unless I'm wrong, you want every single incident and every single packet, because staff time to redact all of that and go through all that would be really extensive. So, perhaps we can start with a report, and then if there are specific things that folks want to see, we can go about it that way. I want to be as helpful and responsive as possible, but I also don't want to take on too much and spend, as you've laid out, Commissioner Carrillo, the staff time to do some of that deeper dive would be pretty intense.
Wendy?
Sure. So Adam is correct that we are receiving some of this information. It's what's attached to the agenda. It's specific to OC spray use. And I think the big difference between what that and Commissioner Meredith is asking for is that this would include assaults that happen, for example, in camp facilities or in the halls where OC spray is not used, which is certainly a number of incidents. So it's partially being provided with this recent information. Then the second thing that I would say is that this is what Commissioner Meredith mentioned about county council is that, and what Adam just said, is that this is a request that has come from this commission, in particular from Commissioner Meredith, but also from the OIG and the justice deputies asking for this information. So that's what the report is being discussed by probation and county council about how we can share that information in a way that doesn't create any compromise for the county and is able to be shared publicly. So these are ongoing conversations.
Commissioner Dupuy, I saw your hand was up. You got a comment?
I did, but I think it was already addressed. So it was really just in regard to, like, I don't want the extra context to hold up the report that that Commissioner Meredith has requested. That was it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Vice Chair Jackson, you're up.
Yeah, I'm sorry you already covered this, Mr. Bettino, but I'm sort of wondering if the department already conducts sort of like routine analysis of that data. So like correlating maybe those incidents with the use of OC spray, because it shouldn't feel like we're asking for novel information, right? It's already things that you guys are looking at and analyzing and hopefully making decisions based on information that's collected. So yeah.
So we are. So that's happening at the institution level for sure on the line. But you know, that's the reason why I mentioned the early intervention system is because I think the updated version of it is really going to allow for a deeper dive on a more consistent basis. We're finalizing. We need to put some policy to it and train folks on how it's going to be used. But we really believe. So I'll say this, and forgive me, but you know, one of the things that comes to the surface when we're talking about these huge initiatives and trying to implement this stuff is culture. A lot of conversation that we're having around this is how to address this culture of fear amongst our staff that if they do something that's within policy, they will still be investigated. Part of the implementation of the early intervention system is to let folks know that if you're following policy, even if you have to go hands-on in a dangerous situation, if you're following policy, then you shouldn't have to then be investigated by internal affairs. I think that's leading to a lot of the non-engagement that we're seeing and a lot of the unwillingness of folks to respond. And as peace officers, we have a duty to intercede. I raise all that because that's kind of in the background, and we want to be creating tools that show and reiterate to folks, follow policy, write what happened. If there's a need for coaching or additional training, then we're going to go about providing that to you. And if you've stepped out of line with policy, you're going to be disciplined. If you've done it egregiously, you may be terminated. You're not allowed to work here if you're abusing kids. So there's things like that we're trying to infuse. And I want to go back to one of the comments that Commissioner Dupuy raised about the environment itself. You know, and I think I mentioned this on our last meeting that this county has not invested in these facilities. And I understand nobody likes juvenile detention facilities. We would like some folks, you know, who are on this call would like to see those things eliminated. But we have the facilities that we have. We are in the process of trying to envision what these facilities should look like. Those that we have to maintain, can we maintain them? Can we create an environment that's more conducive to all of the reform that we all want to see? That's not currently what we have. It's going to take some time.
Yeah, I think a lot of the issues that we're talking about are feeling fear-based, and a lot of it has to do with this really, really toxic culture. And everyone probably has a sense that culture is just seeming so much stronger than strategy at this point. And so I don't know about any innovative efforts that the department has had, but when you're talking about implementing some of these things, do you feel that some of that fear is subsiding as the culture is actually improving?
We hope so. I mean, we have to stick to it and show people, right? I think I can come on here and say all kinds of things. We have to start to demonstrate to folks. I am convinced with some of our new leadership in the institutions that the conversations are happening. And in fact, I'm aware of a few instances where we've been able to pull folks aside and provide coaching in lieu of, you know, sending them down for investigation because it's just easier, or managers themselves feel like they need to cover themselves, right? So we're taking these steps, but we're talking. I mean, days feel here like we're turning this entire thing on its head. I know that's not the case. We have fantastic folks who want to move in the right direction here, but it does feel like the culture just needs a lot of work, as you mentioned, Commissioner Jackson. So there are things that we are aware of. We're trying to take steps to address them. It will take some time, and we have to show people incident by incident, case by case, that we're no longer acting the way management is no longer behaving the way that we used to.
Great. I appreciate you saying that. Is there a timeline for the implementation, like the full implementation of the early intervention system?
So we're a few weeks away, I think. We need to finalize internally. We need to draft some policy around it, provide training to our supervisors and managers. So I think we're a few weeks out at this point and should have something. We can provide a demonstration if we want to do it separately in one of your subcommittees, or we can provide a demonstration here to the POC.
I think a full demonstration would be great at a commission meeting. And when all of that is developed, we like to be the first to know. So.
Okay.
Okay, thank you guys. Wendy, unless there's more discussion on this motion, we should ask for a vote.
Okay, if there's nothing further, I was just trying to capture the motion with the amendment, so I will read to you here what I've got. Commissioner Meredith makes a motion to require the department to provide a report on the number of assaults on youth and staff, the significance of each event and extent of any injury from January 1st, 2022 to June 10th, 2022. And it would be provided by the second meeting in July, which I want to say is July 26th. And then Commissioner Garcia Lays amended, and the amendment was accepted by both Commissioners Meredith and Jackson to include all uses of force by staff to be broken down by week and to include population numbers. And then Commissioner Nong added context around assaults. When in looking at the original motion, I think the significance of the event is that's actually something we can work on as we develop it, so that we'll start with maybe a very, very basic context. And then if the commissioners believe they need more information about that context, we can work on that going forward. Does that sound like I captured it?
That sounds great, Wendy.
Commissioner Meredith?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Get back to my list, and I will then call the roll if that's okay with you, Chair Carrillo, with the vote.
Please, Wendy.
Okay, please vote with aye, nay, or abstain. Commissioner Canales?
Aye.
Commissioner Dupuy?
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia Lays?
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson?
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis?
Aye.
Commissioner Meredith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nong?
Aye.
Commissioner Yamashiro?
Aye.
Chair Carrillo?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Deputy Bettino. Appreciate your time. We're moving on to now item number 4. We will discuss and take appropriate action on the research findings and recommendations about the 56-hour work week in Los Angeles County Probation Department camp facilities. Wendy, please proceed.
Thank you. I'm very excited about this presentation and just going to give a very short introduction, which is to say that the 56-hour work week is something that's been discussed a lot at the PRIT among the board members for many years among staff and the unions. And I'm excited to be able to have Dr. Gongora share with you the results of the study that she led. I want to say a couple of things about why we did it. So we were asked specifically by the Probation Oversight Commission to conduct this study, and part of that was on a recommendation by Supervisor Solis to conduct the study. So we're thankful for that direction. We went into this inquiry with absolutely an academic purpose, not an end goal. So while there are a number of recommendations you'll share, they are recommendations that came out of the research that was conducted, not that were determined before the report was created. This is an overview of a very long report that you're going to hear from Sarah. She has worked very hard to cut her presentation down to a reasonable amount of time, and the feedback from everyone has been, oh, could you also say this? So please read the report. It's exceptional. And I really want to say thank you to Dr. Gongora, to the board for approving the position, and to have her join our team this year and what that means for us. And I'd also, before I hand it over to her, like to say a very warm thank you to probation and to the unions for giving us unfettered access to employees. And that's also true of the partner agencies. They also were able to participate, but probation employees gave a lot of really, really useful and beautiful information here. And we thank the department and the unions for supporting and in some cases encouraging their folks to participate. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Gongora, and can't wait for you all to be able to hear about this report.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Can we bring up the slides? Okay, so I'm Sarah. As mentioned, I'm a project director here with the POC, and I've had the privilege of studying the 56-hour work week. And I'm so thankful to be able to present it to the commission and public today. It feels like it's been a long time coming. So let's just hop on to the next slide. Okay, so before the study began, the Probation Oversight Commission heard many opinions about the 56-hour work week, including calls to end the schedule and other views that express that the schedule is one of the most helpful tools to do supervision work with youth long-term. So as Wendy mentioned, at the request of the Board of Supervisors and the Commission and the public, we began this inquiry to understand the wide division of opinions and how the schedule affects youth, staff, and the implementation of the LA model at detention facilities where it's used. Those facilities are Campus Kilpatrick, Camp Page, Camp Afflerbach, Camp Rocky, and Camp Scott, which is currently physically housed at the Dorothy Kirby Center. Next slide. So the 56-hour work week is actually made up of 3 full work days, made up of 2 16-hour shifts and 1 8-hour shift that can either be at the beginning or the end of the person's week. I actually described it before as 2.5 days of work, but realized that is a mistake because I'd never actually consider an 8-hour day of work a half day of work. So think about it as 3 days of work. Staff sleep at probation facilities on day 1 and day 2 of the schedule, with just a few exceptions. A very interesting feature of staff being there at night is that they are occasionally called back to work by the GSNs or the group supervisor nights to help settle youth if an incident or a disturbance has occurred on the unit. Sometimes staff and supervisors work out a way to stagger the schedule so that folks that are with youth until 10 p.m. are not the same ones that are right up with them at 6 a.m., so allowing for a little bit more sleep. Staff on the 56 have breaks and lunch times away from youth unless there's like a safety issue preventing it. But the overall consensus is that this is a pretty intense work schedule. So despite that intensity, I found that it's viewed favorably by nearly all who work the schedule or who have ever worked the schedule. It was also reported that the extended period of rest that comes after the 3 days of work is really key to coming back refreshed and ready to go again. Let's go to the next slide. So to conduct the study, I looked for written history of why LA County adopted the schedule in the first place and any documentation of outcomes associated with it, either for youth or staff. Overall, I found very little in writing outside of the old union MOUs, so I had to depend heavily on gathering verbal history. We used the flyers you see here to recruit interviewees. And like Wendy mentioned, the director of each camp facility did welcome me out at least for 1 day to encourage staff participation. To outreach to youth, I partnered with the Department of Mental Health, who sent the youth flyer to mental health provider agencies all across the county. And the flyer was also sent to Los Angeles Youth Uprising to share with their community network. Research was reviewed regarding the shift specifically and also extended in some cases to look at other compressed workweek schedules and also to look at the use of the 56 in other professions, such as firefighting, nursing, and caregiving. So we cast a pretty broad net and followed up on interview findings to really try to understand how lived experience and current research intersect. Next slide. So in total, my colleague, Dr. Reynoso, and I interviewed a set of 73 people, including current and former probation employees, and that made up about 80% of our interviewees. The other 20% was co-located partners, including those from DMH and Juvenile Court Health Services, and also advocates. So efforts to interview youth panned out, unfortunately, to only 1 youth interview. And though I really wish we could have had more participation, the individual we spoke to added enormous value with insights that really, I think, can be generalized to speak to the experiences of many youth who experience detention. We also formed a couple of hypotheses around the lack of youth interest to interview, and maybe that one, perhaps youth didn't really realize the effect that the schedule had on their detention, or perhaps that the schedule itself wasn't that, didn't have that great of an effect on detention generally. So either way, the 56 really wasn't like a hot button issue for youth. I did quite a bit of outreach to other probation jurisdictions at both county and state levels. mostly jurisdictions that had something that we felt was in common with Los Angeles County. So whether it was similar in size or population or an urban center or had fire zones. So I learned overall that the schedule is not currently being utilized by other probation departments, though it was previously used in San Diego. And I wrote a bunch about that in the study. So if you're interested, that's a plug to go back and read those parts. All right, let's go to the next. Okay. So as interviews really started to tell the story of the 56-hour work week, I realized that a lot of the concerns raised about the schedule were actually attributed to systemic issues rather than the schedule itself. Systemic issues really set the stage for what can be accomplished by individuals. So these themes came out of hearing people's narrative on their experiences and also working conditions. Since systemic issues really need to be resolved at the level of the system and can't be resolved by the actions of individual staff, as we move on to the findings and recommendations, I hope everyone will keep that in mind. Next slide. So to share some of our key findings. Staff reported that there aren't clear departmental practice standards across facilities. And I learned really that probation's line staff are all trying to figure out approaches that work for them and youth day by day. This finding seems to have very little to do with the 56 and much more to do with the department leaning on individuals to find their own motivation to drive services. Some staff do really well with this, and there are other staff who have struggles and really need clear and practical guidance, but they aren't receiving it, so they're relying on habit. Similar patterns were also observed for partnership, especially with co-located county partners, because again, departmental expectation for partnership or guidance on how departments work alongside each other aren't clear to staff, and that really sets a tone for disappointment and frustration. Some staff also appear to be very personally motivated to build those relationships, and others aren't. And it's being left up to individual staff to decide to pursue that. And that's a systemic issue. What is not a systemic issue, though, is the way that the 56-hour work week compounds the barrier, since there are only 3 days to make connections. So let's talk about the LA model. So full implementation of the LA model relies on the participation of probation officers to plan and participate in multiple meetings, so multidisciplinary team meetings and individual rehabilitation plan meetings. The presence of staff for 3 days a week sets a really clear limitation to collaboration and scheduling opportunities. This could really be a barrier to full implementation. There's also a lack of a unified vision from the department to staff about what it means to provide a home-like or a family-like environment, or what it means to provide a therapeutic environment, which reduces these really powerful ideas down to jargon. There's also disagreement on whether the 3 shift transitions weekly from the 56 provides more consistency for youth than with other less compressed work schedules. Okay, so for emergencies. So as I mentioned about fire zones, all of the camps are in high fire severity zones, except for Camp Scott, which is currently all youth ordered to Camp Scott are currently at Dorothy Kirby Center. So all other camps are in high fire severity zones, and multiple evacuations have taken place over the last few years. Having staff on the 56 allows for sufficient staffing for an emergency evacuation to be able to take place around the clock, and even while keeping night staffing to a minimum. We also found that overtime was used less at facilities that use the 56 when compared specifically to Dorothy Kirby Center. And we looked at multiple samples of time to come to that finding. Due to lack of similarity, I didn't try to make any comparison to the juvenile halls, but there was definitely a difference from Dorothy Kirby Center. Let's go to the next slide. So I want to jump right into the 10 recommendations that were made through our study, and I'm going to continue to share findings as to why we came to each of these recommendations. I'm also going to break the cardinal rule of PowerPoint a little bit and read some of the recommendations, so please forgive me for that in advance. These first 3 recommendations are strongly connected to major systemic issues that affect all staff providing supervision to youth and really aren't limited to those working the 56. So let's jump right in here. Recommendation number 1, a clear set of departmental goals, including a vision for the future of services, should be communicated to staff. So many staff shared that they really don't know where they or their skills fit into the future of the probation department. They reported hearing information through gossip and hearsay, which led to fear. So gaining an understanding directly from leadership would really serve to raise low morale by letting staff know that they are valued enough to be in on the plan. Recommendation number 2, a comprehensive training and coaching program with a continuous quality improvement process should be implemented. So one of the largest complaints against the 56-hour schedule is a lack of consistency of services delivered to youth. And during our interviews, it was repeatedly shared that the training, coaching, and mentorship opportunities are lacking to bring consistency. Staff repeatedly said that they would like more practical training for themselves and their colleagues. There's also a need to measure the implementation of skills acquired during training, and that could also serve to affirm the work of those staff that are consistently meeting and exceeding practice expectations, right? We want to affirm and praise what's being done well. Recommendation number 3, expectations of supervising deputy probation officers, that I'm just going to call supervisors, to model and measure practice behaviors must be clarified and standardized. So practice discrepancies couldn't exist as widely as they reportedly do without supervision discrepancies. Mirroring almost exactly what was said about staff performance, it was reported that some supervisors actively coach staff, address performance issues, and promote supportive work environments because they're personally motivated to do so. But some simply don't. So probation really needs to clarify expectations to supervisors, to be modeling appropriate practice behaviors, and to provide interactive supervision opportunities. So these recommendations might sound really familiar to some of you that have been following this work, and truly they aren't anything new. These recommendations have been made multiple times to the probation department, verbally and in writing, at least from what I found since about 2017, and they can be found in some of the reports referenced in our study. Next slide. Okay. So the rest of the recommendations are specific to the 56 and the facilities that utilize the schedule. So recommendation 4, formalized shift exchanges are needed at the beginning and end of the 56-hour work week, right? So while there are overlapping hours between shifts, verbal exchanges of information are informal, which staff said lead to missing information, especially during the first day of their shift. So we think that the exchange of information really shouldn't be left to chance. Recommendation number 5. The probation department needs a standardized training and protocol for any employee tasked with setting the staff duties and breaks on the 56. So restful breaks appear to be a key component to making it through the 3 days. Many interviewees shared that they learned to set a schedule either from another supervisor or a more experienced colleague or even on their own. Unfortunately, favoritism was also brought up repeatedly in the discussion of breaks. And many staff also reflected just being grateful for any breaks and reported that on other schedules and in other facilities, they got no breaks, which motivated them to not complain or even try to address issues about unequal breaks. Recommendation number 6. Probation's overtime and outside employment policies should be reviewed and amended to align with research. So generally, people that work the schedule, like I said, they love the schedule. And for most, they reported that it promotes a healthy work-life balance that they were pleased with and really didn't associate any negative consequences. Now, research seems to back up the idea that people who choose a highly compressed work schedule, that choice in itself may mitigate the risks associated with it. But research also indicates that when days off are used to work overtime or other demanding jobs and not be resting, that puts staff at a really increased risk for poor health, burnout, and attrition. So probation's current overtime policy allows for up to 24 hours a week of overtime and a max of 96 hours a month. And we think that should be looked at and aligned to promote better health outcomes for staff. Next slide. Recommendation 7. Regular evaluation of staffing levels necessary to respond to emergencies and evacuations. So one of the primary reasons cited by probation for the continued use of the 56-hour schedule is emergency preparedness. And this hasn't really been a consideration in discussions of best practices, though I think everyone can agree that keeping youth safe is the #1 priority. Probation staff have done an excellent job of evacuating facilities during extreme weather events that have occurred in the last 5 years, from high winds that happened this year, and of course the Woolsey fire in 2018 that damaged Campus Kilpatrick. So appropriate staffing levels should be assessed to ensure that youth can be safely evacuated in an emergency 24 hours a day. Recommendation number 8. Further research is required to determine the 56-hour workweek's impact on absences, overtime, and staff retention. So our interviews uncovered that people believe that there are less callouts in facilities that use the 56. And it did appear that facilities that use the schedule did use less overtime. So that implies that staff on the 56 may take fewer leaves and have less callouts. And using less overtime obviously has financial implications, but more importantly, fewer staff absences promote consistency for youth. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So before I move on to our last 2 recommendations, I just want to pull everyone back in that might have zoned out. I know it's hard sometimes on Zoom or WebEx, but stay with me. We're almost through, and these 2 are really key. Okay, recommendation number 9. So in order for probation to fully implement the LA model, assessment needs to take place around the ability of those on the 56-hour shift to meaningfully participate in planning, meetings, and activities that affect youth. So probation staff currently on 56-hour work week are responsible for casework. They are assigned a distinct number of youth with whom they meet individually and document their progress. The LA model's expectation is that caseworkers continue those duties in addition to the planning and participation in those meetings that I mentioned earlier, the MDTs and the IRPs. So if the time limitations of the 56 impedes participation in these critical elements aimed at improving outcomes for youth, then there is a need to reduce the scale of the use of the 56 work week. So this could come in the form of the use of a hybrid model, like some staff are on the 56 and other staff are focused on implementation. This could come in the form of use of a less compressed schedule, like a 410, or probation could choose to focus the scope of staff duties for those on the 56 rather than expanding them, and to yield case management and counseling duties to other county departments or community-based organizations that are already delivering those services. Okay, our last recommendation, recommendation number 10. Probation needs to negotiate a plan for those staff who are either not willing or interested in implementing practice change that aligns with providing a therapeutic setting for youth. So a very common thread that was heard in interviews was that this work is not for everyone. And there were unfortunately a number of findings of the perception and experience that some staff have experienced such a serious level of burnout, of vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue that it interferes with the ability to engage with youth. So while we hope that the probation department will do everything in its power to pull those folks back in and to provide them the training and the mentorship opportunities and support that they need, probation also has a responsibility to prepare an exit strategy for those not interested in providing a therapeutic environment to benefit youth. And with that said, probation also has an equal responsibility to those staff who are implementing change and providing more youth-centered and trauma-responsive services to not have to constantly be repairing for their colleagues. So the POC really believes that all detained youth deserve a chance at better outcomes that could be possible with the full implementation of the LA model. Next slide. So thank you everybody for listening. I hope you'll scan the QR code and visit the PO website and check out the report if you haven't yet. Thank you so much.
What a great performance and presentation. Thank you, Sarah. Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments for this agenda item?
We do not yet. If you'd like to make public comment, please raise your hand. A few people are doing that, so we'll get to it. And Janae, I believe we did not have any written public comment about this item. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so Millie, we'll start with you. We're going to unmute you and put our timer up on the screen. And
can you hear me?
Yeah, you're welcome to begin.
Hi, this is Melinda Kakani with Children's Defense Fund and the Los Angeles Youth Uprising Coalition. Thank you for starting this long needed report. As we know, the 56-hour work week has been part of the barrier to moving young people from Barry J to Kilpatrick. And while there's kind of nothing determinative from this report, I think it's important that we use this as an opportunity to perhaps try something different. If not a single other jurisdiction utilizes the 56-hour work week, that should be telling. That should be determinative. If there is no history, no research, nothing related to like outcomes, better outcomes for young people, length of employment for probation officers, that should be determinative. And here is an opportunity for us to try something different at Kilpatrick to see if it better impacts young people. Do the comparison once you have two opportunity or two setups going on at the same time. And additionally, I just wanted to name, while I know it's unfortunate that there was only one young person, I think it's really problematic to extrapolate what that one young person said to a larger group of young people. My hope is that this is just the beginning of a report and that additional work can be done with young people who are both currently incarcerated or leaving these facilities to better engage them on what it looks like to have staff there for 3 days versus having the same staff there for 5 days a week. And I know there was something mentioned in the report about how it's sometimes helpful in emergency situations to evacuate young people, for example, from these facilities. The track record thus far is horrific in terms of what it looks like to evacuate young people from facilities. We know that what happened at every single facility, at least since I've been in LA, really is lawsuit worthy in terms of what happened to young people, the way they were treated, the way they were moved, the way families were notified, the shackling, the fights, all of that. So I just hope that this is the beginning of more to come.
Thank you, Millie. Next up, we have Damon Ayala. Damon, give us a second. And if you can unmute yourself, you can begin.
My name is Damon. I'm a social work intern at USC with Dignity and Power now and LA Youth Uprising. I just wanted to offer that 56-hour work week, a remnant of the past, based on an old model of juvenile justice where there's no programming and it was never expected to produce any positive outcomes for anybody but probation officers. From my own personal experience as a youth at Camp Barley Flats, I remember one of the counselors, a probation officer, Mr. Dean. He was one of the really, really good ones. And, he was supportive, encouraging, he motivated us, he gave us hope. He'd be there for 3 days and he'd be gone for even more days. And so we were lacking consistency. And what we got in between was mostly warehousing and then added some in with some bad treatment. So, the 56-hour work week does not represent the direction of restorative justice that LA County has gone to with Youth Justice Reimagined, which relies on evidence-based programming, not one of warehousing youth, which the 56-hour work week supports. As such, the county and its departments have the right to adjust work schedules based on operating needs of the department, which transitioning over to the LA model represents. It's an opportunity, and it's time for change from what we know doesn't work. This body should be pushing on probation and LA County to restructure work schedules to fit youth needs and not those of probation officers. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Damon. Next up, we have Thomas. Thomas Bell, we're going to unmute you and you can begin.
Hi, thank you. I'll make it quick. I just wanted to thank the young lady that came to Alpha Ball. She was very professional. She was nice, easy to talk to, and just made it really easy to give our opinions. I just want to thank her for coming there. And also, I know, I can't say too much about it, but I just want people to remember that we have staffing issues, and $7 a gallon for gas is not going to make it any easier. That's all. I can't say much more.
Thank you for that. There is a section in the report that talks about commuting and some other issues related to that. Call-in user number 5. Your number starts with 951. We're going to unmute you and then you dial *6. I'm sorry, I don't remember who you are, but you're now unmuted, so you dial *6, you can speak.
Thank you very much. This is Janita Beauchamp, regular attender of your meetings. My questions about this is, and I don't know if this is a question that can be answered, but is this what the probation officers want? Have they come to an agreement for their contract? I know they were past due for the contract, so it might be great on paper and the report and the feedback, but is this something that the probation officers, who are the ones who are going to actually have to work this schedule, really want? Because if it's not something that they want, it's hard to induce positivity with the youth if they're not happy about what their work schedule entails or is required of them. So my question to whoever can answer that question is this working in conjunction with what the majority of the probation officers are requesting per their contract? Thank you.
Thank you. I do actually think Sarah can partially answer that question in a moment. We'll go to Krista Newble. Krista, you're unmuted. You can begin.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So the only thing I wanted to bring up was in regards to that 56-hour shift, which is a contract union issue. When you talk about the 56-hour shift and you talk about places like Malibu, where Kilpatrick is, you really have to think about who is going to drive to Malibu. No one that we know of, except for one probation officer, because his house was one of the houses that was affected when the fire happened, lives in Malibu. LA County spans 4,000 miles. Everyone lives everywhere. One of the main reasons for the 56-hour shift is because, again, like you stated in your report, which I did read, everyone lives everywhere, and these camps are located in areas that are spread apart. So getting to Malibu on a 6-2, 2-10, or a 10-6 shift is not feasible for people because you have to deal with the traffic, getting through Palisades, going through all of that. I don't know if any of you are Los Angeles natives or if you're just plants here, but trying to get to Malibu during these hours is not going to be efficient for anyone to get there on time, for people to get relieved and to get back and to come back on a 5-day schedule. It's just not, it's not going to work for anyone. That's one of the advantages of having a 56-hour shift in these camps, so they can stay there and be there. And I personally worked 56 hours for 7 years. And to this day, I still have a hard time getting up Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, even though I have what some would say would be a coveted spot. It is still hard to get up. I love my 56-hour shift. I love being with the kids that I was with. I love seeing them all the time. And my shift, my camp, we had a good time. So it is nothing negative about a 56-hour shift on my end. And I still have contact with them. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go to one more public commenter, which is call-in user number 24. Your number starts with 866-931.
So you, once we unmute you, which is going to happen in a second, you dial *6 and you can.
Yes, thank you, Director Julian. This is Mel Bailey again. I switched phones. In preparation for the conversation, I spoke with a couple of fire departments because the 56-hour shift is kind of modeled after that, and none of them. I spoke to Assistant Chief, spoke to Fresno, spoke to Long Beach, and they don't have any problems whatsoever with being able to be alert enough to respond. I know that was one of the things that was mentioned. Number two, as far as the reports that are being done, if officers are being replaced with CBOs and et cetera, I believe that it takes a police officer to submit the report to court, and that would create a situation with not being able to be as conclusive with the information that's being provided. Number three, the 56-hour shift allows for POs to be close with the kids. I did that shift for years, and I can attest to that. The study, was it done with a full camp? You also mentioned burnout, but the days off has been proven that it allows for the rejuvenation if there won't be burnout. And then lastly, we talk about we've spoken about morale several times, and so if you take this away without having it being fully discussed with labor, how will this help the morale that we have discussed several times in these POC meetings? I'm sorry, one more thing. The LA model. A lot of the jurisdictions, they look to Los Angeles for guidance, and that's been historically. So it's a little counterproductive for us to look at others for guidance in this regard. And sorry to sound a little jumbled, just trying to get it in within the 2 minutes. All right, thank you, Director Julian.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. So Sarah's not going to comment about what the union is asking for in their negotiations because we absolutely do not know the answer to that. But I think she can very clearly comment on Ms. Beauchamp's question about whether people like this schedule or not.
Overwhelmingly, people do like having the schedule, and they do. Most staff working it would definitely like to keep it in place.
That's the end of public comment.
Okay, thank you. We will now go on to Commissioner questions or comments. I see a couple hands. Commissioner Yamashiro, you're up.
Thank you. So I first want to really say thank you to the staff and Dr. Gongora for such a heavy lift. It's such a great kind of, I mean, you'll see where I'm going with my comments. I think it's a great introduction to the question, but I feel like there's more work to be done. And I don't mean to say more work for you, Dr. Gongora, but I feel like this is a great foundation to kind of continue this question, because I think I'll just make one observation and then maybe a question. The first is, a good portion of the report, and I think a lot of and understandably, a lot of the public remarks by probation staff have to do with the value of the current schedule to either them personally or the feasibility of long commutes and overall morale, which I think are all very important. But there wasn't a lot in the report, and I haven't heard much comment about what is the best for the youth in terms of the efficacy of the modality of treatment and the and how the 56-hour work week fits into that. And I know you did a lot of work, Dr. Gongora, and kind of reaching out to other jurisdictions, and you and I had kind of a conversation offline before we started the meeting. But I think one thing that if I missed it in the report, my apologies to everyone on this call, but also to Dr. Gongora. But one thing that I thought was that I couldn't find was a kind of a reference to the import of personal relationships between the rehabilitative staff and the youth who they are charged with overseeing and rehabilitating, and outcomes, which is kind of the foundational question that kind of then leads to the larger question is, what, if any, impact does the 56-hour work week have on the ability of the probation staff to establish consistent long-term relationships with the youth, that in turn would feed presumably the efficacy of the program and how the 56-hour work week impacts that. So I think there's a lot of literature out there about the relationship between teachers, professors, and their relationships with their students and academic success. I don't know that there's a ton of research out there that is parallel within the rehabilitative community, but I think that I would suspect that it's consistent, right? Is that you're not going to be able to get results from youth without a strong personal relationship, and presumably that's the reason many of the youth are in these facilities, is to develop a relationship. And hopefully, and we always hear of these, like one of the commenters mentioned earlier in the meeting, a person who made a huge impact on him because he had a great personal relationship with them, and we hear those stories anecdotally all the time. So I think I would think that it's a safe assumption that those personal relationships are important. I guess one thing my hope is that we, at some point, if we could address the extent to which the 56-hour work week gets in the way of that and is disruptive of that, and even better, if there's a way to tie that to outcomes. Thank you.
Sarah, do you want to address that? And then I have maybe one thing I'll add after you.
I really had some difficulty with finding outcomes specifically tied to schedule. And I think that especially like probation, looking for probation or like law enforcement type outcomes, it was challenging to find something that had a relation with compressed work weeks, even generally. So we really tried to pull from youth experience. And as you see, that really didn't happen. And so I think our hope is for the future for some outcome studies to happen specifically in LA.
I'll just echo that and say that, I mean, we're like a broken record over here about the data and research, but it just can't be emphasized enough to say that we don't really know what the outcomes are of, for example, Campus Kilpatrick. So, you know, the implementation of the LA model has been complicated because of the Woolsey fire and because of COVID and other things. But, you know, do youth who complete their camp experience at Campus Kilpatrick have higher educational success rates, lower recidivism rates, you know, better experience rates than young people who go to other camps? We don't have a lot of that outcome information, and it makes it really difficult to measure the effectiveness. And I know that Chief Gonzalez is a very big fan of those types of measurements, and it's a place where I think we actually can collaborate with the leadership of the department to move them forward in terms of that measurement. It's just not responsible really to make policy decisions without that outcome information.
Commissioner Dupuy, you're up.
I want to echo the gratitude, Dr. Gongora, for that report and for all the work and research you put into it. It was very impressive. So thank you. I want to piggyback also on some of Commissioner Yamashiro's comments or thoughts, you know, around the youth perspective. And I had a question around that in particular, is were we allowed to actually talk to the young people at Kilpatrick about this question?
Opted to not speak to youth that are actively in detention currently because the issue is a hot button issue clearly for staff. And personally, I had concerns about talking to youth that are in detention.
Okay. I understand that. And also it feels like the youth perspective outside of detention is very important too, particularly if they've had experience in Kilpatrick or another facility with 56-hour work week and other spots. But, you know, I wonder if we can revisit that, because I just feel like the now, especially for young people, you know, when they're home, they don't want to talk to anybody about probation. You know, they just left there. Why are they going to want to enter into a study? I mean, I feel like it'd have to be really compelling, you know, some really great incentives, and not, you know, the young people inside have an active experience with what a difference might be for them, if any. So it would be, I think, interesting to revisit that. And also, I want to just caution us, even when we do think about comparing the outcomes from young people from Kilpatrick, or who went to Kilpatrick and the LA model, to other facilities around the 56-hour work week in particular, because there are so many other elements of the LA model that are present there that if affect outcomes, that it can't really be narrowed down. I think in terms of data outcomes in that way, you really have to talk to the young people, would give you the most informative understanding of how the work week impacted them. So I just wanted to pose that as a consideration as we consider getting data to assess outcomes and the kinds of comparisons we can do.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Meredith?
First of all, again, I want to commend, it was a great report. I already sent her an email to that effect. It was very impressive, but I'm impressed by all of our POC staff. One of the things that came out was that item 4, the formalized briefing. That is really critical, I think. I've got a text here from a staffer saying that we addressed a lot of these issues years ago and been listened to, we wouldn't be here today. And I'm actually going to put you in contact with this person, because they've got several good recommendations here on how to address that team approach to case management. But more importantly, I'm kind of concerned about this 16-hour workday. I've worked 12-hour workdays, which have gone into 14 and 16 hours, and that's a long day. And, you know, even though you've got some rest time in there, that really can impact on your performance. And especially at the end of the day, do I really have the time to talk to this child and get their input, or this youth and get their input? Or yeah, I got you. And I'm just tired. So that was one of the concerns that came out, but a great report. I'm going to put you in touch with this person, because they got some really great ideas, and they've been around the department quite a while. And that's more of a comment about the report itself and the formalized briefing.
Thank you, Don. Once again, thank you, Sarah. I don't see any more hands up, so we'll be wrapping up this item number. Moving on to item number 5. Agenda item number 5, we will hear a report from Chief Deputy Karen Fletcher on the Los Angeles County Probation Department's progress in reaching compliance with the suitability requirements of the California Board of State of Community Corrections, BSCC. Met again since our last meeting. They meet findings of compliance and suitability at Barry J. Nordhoff, but found an additional area of noncompliance at Central Juvenile Hall. The public documents from the BSCC are attached in this agenda. Chief Deputy Fletcher, if you're here, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Carrillo. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to provide an update. So as mentioned, I think the documents were attached to the agenda, but just as a recap, because I know we've covered a lot in this meeting. We have been under a corrective action plan with the BSCC related to both juvenile halls. That had to do with room confinement at both Barry J and Central, and safety checks. That had been ongoing from last fall. And then, of course, during a site visit in February, the BSCC found us non-compliant related to one youth, and that involved the same issue of room confinement. And then they added the program recreation and exercise that pertained to this one youth. So we moved out of Central Juvenile Hall, and we then repopulated Central Juvenile Hall between May 18th and May 25th. So what we knew from the BSCC is that once we repopulated Central Juvenile Hall, they would begin their inspection. So what they advised at the June 9th BSCC board meeting is that they found us in compliance in all matters that we were working on at Barry J. They also found us in compliance at Central Juvenile Hall related to room confinement, programs, recreation, and exercise. but they did find us non-compliant and a continuing non-compliance status for safety checks just at Central Juvenile Hall. So what they really looked at was a time period at Central Juvenile Hall beginning on May 18th, when that first group of youth were moved back to Central Juvenile Hall, and they continued to look at data around safety checks until May 29th. So a total of 12 days. Looking at our paperwork for safety checks, and also then how that matched to the video that is available at Central Juvenile Hall. So some of the issues that were raised by Lisa Southwell was that the paperwork was in some instances inconsistent with what she viewed on the video. So that is one issue that was identified, and that happened in several instances. And then also how we document when youth are in their rooms or not in their rooms. So if a youth is not in their room, we mark it as closed, or we did. And that meant the youth was maybe in the day room or at school or at some other location, medical, for example. So we would mark it as closed, which then would document that we didn't have to do a safety check on that room. But what she found when she looked back is that, you know, on paper it might have said closed and the youth didn't come out for maybe another 5 or 6 minutes. So the youth was actually in the room. And then she also looked at instances where we did not conduct a safety check within the required 15 minutes. So it might have been at 18 minutes or 20 minutes, but not within the 15. So as you may know, the section in BSCC standards regulations is that safety checks have to occur every 15 minutes and they have to be random and varied. So you can't do it every 15 minutes, you know, it might be 7 minutes and then another 13 minutes, so that we really are very
We seem to have lost Deputy Chief Fletcher's connection. Janae, maybe we can try to call her. Let's give it just a second.
Am I back?
You're back. Great.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm having challenges here. So I'm not sure where I cut off. I think I covered the paperwork, documenting room checks and the video. There were discrepancies in that in some instances. Also, where a room was marked as closed, indicating that a youth was no longer in the room and the youth may not have exited the room for a few minutes after the fact. And then when safety checks were not done within the 15 minutes, that they were maybe at 18 minutes or 20 minutes. So those were the major categories that Lisa found when she did the audit. We took immediate action in consultation with BSCC and also the DOJ around how we could address that. And so a new safety check sheet was issued that gives staff a very clear way to document when they miss a safety check. Our forms and our training did not align with that previously, so we did make that correction, so that's clear. An instructional memo went out to staff. Additional training has occurred since that time, and the internal audits are occurring as well. And so I talked to Ms. Southwell for a fairly good chunk of time this morning and talked through what we were seeing in the internal audits, and that it did look as though the issues had been resolved. And I know you're all thinking that we've been here before where we have resolved issues and then the BSCC comes back and finds something else. We are trying our best to make sure that our staff are very clear with what they need to do, that it does match actually what they are doing. You know, our staff are really diligent about making sure that we comply with BSCC regulations. And I know the level of staffing has been a consistent topic of discussion. I went in a couple of nights at Central Juvenile Hall and talked to GSNs and talked to other staff on the PM shift to ask them what the biggest challenges were around safety checks. Now, the GSNs didn't express a lot of the challenges because the majority of time that the GSN is on duty is during sleeping hours. And so they don't have those consistent interactions with youth as the other shifts do during awake hours. But some of the other staff that have worked the other shifts talk about the lack of staffing and having extra staff there available to do safety checks when some staff are out in the day room and other staff have chosen to self-separate or in their rooms for some other reason. So what often happens if we don't have that backup staff available to assist with the safety checks, our staff will start to walk down the hallway, right, and do a safety check on a room where a youth might start to engage them and ask them for, you know, products or food or ask them questions. So our staff are engaging with the individual youth, which then puts them behind on some of the safety checks. So there's a lot of disruption that happens in a good way because our staff are engaging with the youth, but that does come into play when we are looking at safety checks. If you recall, in the last inspection, we had safety check sheets at the end of a hallway. And so there was one sheet for the entire side of the unit. And we knew that that wasn't a good practice. And so we aligned ourselves with what best practices are and with what other counties are doing in California and with the technical assistance of the BSCC and put a safety check sheet on every single door so that we are making sure that our staff are seeing visually the youth in the room and noting that. So we've made a lot of corrections to what was happening. And again, the training is very important. And the quality assurance measures that we've put in place seem to be working. Lisa will be back and she will provide additional technical assistance per our conversation this morning. And then she will have to do another inspection. The BSCC board meeting has been set for Monday, July 25th. That just came out from the BSCC. And at that point, Lisa's report will be considered on what she finds in this reinspection. And then we will obviously go from there. Worst case scenario, if we are still found unsuitable, then we will have a certain length of time to have to move our kids out of Central. We do believe that the corrections have been helpful, and the additional ways in which a staff person can document why they missed a safety check, you know, if there's a disturbance in the unit, whatever that case may be, if a youth becomes ill, whatever it is, they have now the ability to document that, which, you know, we were surprised to learn they didn't have before. So I'm happy to answer other questions, but we are looking very specifically at the instances where we failed to have a safety check to see if there's more to it, if corrective action in a disciplinary process is warranted. We will pursue that. Lisa hasn't been on site since just prior to the board meeting on June 9th, but she is returning. She's actually going to be back tomorrow and take a look at some things. But we are going to sit down with those very specific instances and talk about what really happened and what we need to do in the event that we need to go through progressive discipline with staff. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief Deputy. Before we go there, we have some comments from the public. Wendy, do you have any written or live public comments?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chief Fletcher. So please raise your hand if you'd like to make comments. You can always also send your comments to info@poc.lacounty.gov. I see just one hand raised. Go ahead and click that little raise your hand icon if you want to make public comment. We'll start with Trey. Trey, you're unmuted, so if you unmute yourself, you can begin. Trey, can you hear us? Okay, I don't see any other hands raised, Chair Carrillo, so I think we can move on.
Thank you, Wendy. Commissioners, any questions or comments for Chief Deputy Fletcher? Commissioner Garcia-Lace?
Thanks. So Chief Fletcher, I listened in on the BSCC meeting and was really concerned when I heard them describe the videos not matching the papers. I had sort of envisioned in my own mind somebody at the beginning of a shift is sort of signing off on all of it, or at the end of their shift signing off on all of it, and then doing whatever the best they could do. So you've given us, I think, what sounds like more details, which is that generally what's happening is people were taking a long enough time to do all the checks that they were no longer within the 15 minutes, but you described it as being within 3 minutes of 15 minutes. So I'm glad that that explains, that it was more minor than it might have appeared, which, what was described at the BSCC meeting could have also included intentional lying to cover up no checks being done, which is, I think, what some of the community took this as based on their earlier comments. But what I'd like to know is, were there any instances where checks were not done during, for a half hour or more, but were documented as having been done? Like, did that happen at all?
Right, so I don't have that specific information. Those are some of the instances that Lisa and I are going to sit down and look at. When I had a conversation with her, she said and my question was, what was the longest period of time where we didn't?
I thought about asking you that, yeah.
Safety check, right? And she said about 35 minutes. And so I don't know in that particular instance what was documented, but from talking with Lisa, I think we looked at one particular instance and it looked as though that could be the case, right? That could be that we just wrote in something that was false. But a second review and a third review really determined that our staff did exactly what they were supposed to do. And so I was very relieved and pleased to know that our staff was conducting business as they're trained to do. And I don't have any belief that our staff are falsifying anything. I think that there's so much going on in our units. We have the tremendous number of call outs and folks on leave that we often struggle to meet that 15 minutes. So the 35 minutes was the longest that she identified for me in that conversation. But again, we're going to go back and see exactly what happened. And that's kind of the beauty and the curse, right, of the video review, is that you can see exactly what's happening. If I'm doing a safety check and I miss it because I'm aiding some other youth, then you can justify that, right? But if I walk over and I sit down and start talking to somebody, a coworker, then that's problematic. And so those are the things that we're trying to root out and make sure that we're doing things in compliance with Title 15, but 35 minutes, but that was one instance. Other times it is minutes off. I even asked the question, is there a difference between the time that we're putting down and maybe the timestamp on the camera? So we looked at that and that didn't seem to be the case either. So we're going to dig into it more, and certainly by the next meeting, we should have some more information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Vice Chair Jackson, you're up.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Carrillo. And Ms. Fletcher, thank you for your presentation. I think when you started talking, many of us had our ear close to the speaker to really get a clear update on what's happening and if it's confirmed that there's some neglect when it comes to those safety checks. And so thank you for that. I was hoping to get more insight on the internal audits and wanting to know more about what that looks like independent of BSCC and how they're supporting the process, who's assigned, what's the routine.
We have a compliance person at each facility, and so they are looking at the paperwork to make sure that it is in order. So on every safety check, a supervisor actually goes into the unit and looks at the safety check sheet to see if everything is completed accurately, and they sign off on that sheet. What we're doing now and what we did previously, but as we have returned to Central Juvenile Hall with a new set of directors, with the exception of a couple folks, they have been retrained on how we should be reviewing video. So we're taking a look at the safety check sheet and then pulling the video to match those times to make sure that our staff, if I say I'm doing it at 6:05 a.m., that the video matches that 6:05 is when the safety check happened at a particular room. And so it's time consuming, but well worth it, because then we can go back and do some coaching and counseling with staff in real time about what is happening. So all of that is occurring, which is great, but our BSCC coordinator at the facility has been very helpful as well.
Great. It just sounds like part of the thinking is that the findings could have been prevented if that body, if that group had a really sound system in place. And probably the hope is that after this unsuitability finding, that you guys are really getting that process airtight.
Right, and it is the hope that we will be airtight. You know, there's and I think Lisa agrees. You know, no facility is going to be at 100%, but if we are catching where we are not meeting the standards and addressing that very quickly, then that's going to benefit everyone, right? But we truly do not believe it is any intentional disregard for the regulations. We really do struggle with staffing, and having the appropriate level of staffing to assist does help us greatly, especially with safety checks, because you have that other person really to see what's going on in the rooms and in you know, the day room, for example. So that's why some of the issues are arising during the AM and PM shift, and very few arising on the overnight shift, because most of our youth are asleep.
Sure. I mean, I could see how maybe we couldn't get like score 100% in all areas, but when it comes to safety protocol and those checks, I don't think that there's any capacity for us to be delivering under 100%. And so the goal would be to, you know, overperform when it comes to that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, 100% is always the goal. We know that that's not always going to happen, but the safety checks are a fundamental core duty of our staff. And they know that. They want to comply. We are just met with some of those staffing challenges, and we are trying to overcome them. And even making sure, you know, that our deployed staff, as they come in to assist us with the staffing ratios, that they understand what has to happen and why it has to happen. So that's incredibly important, and that's what's happening in the institutions now.
Were any of those safety check, like the issue areas, were they any of the, sorry, I can't even think straight, in one of the high need units, like maybe where some of the youth that needed increased observation?
So
Were
if
any of the
there's
concerns in those?
Yeah, if there's
Sorry.
one-on-ones, then the staff is sitting with them full time, right? Which often happens and affects the staffing levels, right? Because we're pulling them to have the one-on-one. So those issues are not there. But if you're asking if it happened in our DD unit, for example, at Central, I can verify that when we go back and look at each individual situation.
That'd be great.
Wendy?
Sure. I just wanted to thank Deputy Chief Fletcher for that report, and let the commissioners and public know that Dr. Reynoso and I have also had the opportunity to speak directly to Lisa Southwell with the BSCC, and her report to us reflects really very precisely what Deputy Chief Fletcher just reported. So I feel really confident about the movement, and I think that in this case, it seems clear that the BSCC is continuing to do their job in terms of reflecting on the Title 15 requirements and areas of compliance and non-compliance, but in a more in a less very specific way in terms of the reporting, is feeling very positive about the direction that that both facilities are moving, which overall is obviously positive for everyone, in particular, like what Commissioner Jackson is saying, and looking at meeting the minimum standards. So that's been our experience in the conversations in the last couple of weeks as well.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Deputy Chief Fletcher. Appreciate that report.
Thank you.
Moving on now to item number 6. Are there any matters not posted on the agenda to discuss or to place on a future meeting agenda for action? And this is for commissioners and staff. Okay.
Well, I guess I'll add one that Commissioners Yamashiro and Dupuy and Sarah and I are going to be meeting to talk about data and the data MOU and the data dashboard. And I think at the next meeting, it might be appropriate to have an official update to the full commission on some of those issues.
Commissioner Meredith?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment here to recognize I got a call from Dr. Mazza at Central today to let us know that 5 people are graduating high school. So I want to congratulate on behalf of the commission, Andrew M., Daniela Ruby, Michael S., Omarian N., Richard C., and Samaj W. on getting their degrees today and graduating from high school. I think that's really a good recognition for Central.
Thank you so much, Don. Congratulations to these 246 students. Commissioner Dupuy, you're up.
Yeah, I wanted to just bring to everyone's attention about the electronic monitoring presentation and report that was presented to us a few weeks back. I've been following up with Professor Barani and with Richard, but I need to still get some information that hasn't been sent. Specifically, there's a bit of a misalignment with what was stated and what's in the documents about electronic monitoring in particular. So just wanted to put that on the record, and hopefully we can get some information from them soon.
I think I'll take that suggestion both in terms of following up on the data request as well as placing it on a future agenda on one of the July agendas.
Great.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Moving on to item number 7 is an invitation for members of the public to address the commission on items not on the agenda. Wendy, do we have anyone on the line for that?
Janae, did we have any written public comment about items not on the agenda?
No, not so far.
Okay, and I don't see any hands raised. Just click on that little hand or dial *3 if you're on the phone. It doesn't look like we have any general public comment.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yep. Okay. So we'll unmute call-in user 24, who, if this is still the same number, I believe it's Mel Bailey, 866-931.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Bailey.
Okay. Thank you, Director Julian. I just one comment for possible future agenda items. The East San Fernando Valley Area Office is hosting a community resource fair on July 27th. I would like to professionally invite all of you to come and participate. And another thing I would like for the POC to consider is to contact our media and marketing team so that you can have a better idea of all of the amazing and awesome things that my colleagues are doing, not only at work, but in the community. And I only beg this of you because often we come on here and we're literally getting bashed from angle to angle, from side to side. And 24 years later, I still love this department. I love my colleagues. I love the kids we work with, the adults we work with. And there are a lot of so super ultra positive events, stories that are not being heard. And we normally don't take a braggadocious approach, so you don't see it. We don't walk around with cameras and record everything, but I just really want this commission to have a full and neutral understanding of what it is that my colleagues are doing out here in the community. And the community members are welcomed as well. That's all. Thank you for the space and time. Have a blessed day.
Thank you. We've got one more, which is user number, call-in user number 7323471. If you dial *6 on your phone, you should be able to speak.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'd just like to say again that there are wonderful probation officers, and maybe sometimes it's important to listen to the youth that have positive things to say. Sometimes you have youth that are, and sometimes they're angry and it doesn't matter, but you have a lot of youth that would love to tell you the good things that probation officers have done and what they continue to do, and how, they'll call looking for you if you move to another camp, and just different things. I just don't want the probation department, a few people or a few incidents to prove that we've done nothing, but we've done great things throughout the years. And I just don't want that to be a caveat to think, they're no good and they're not worth it, but we're worth it. And every day that we go to work, it proves that we're worth it. It proves that we care. It proves that we're going to show up. And again, we don't want to hurt anybody's child, because I'm a parent and I wouldn't want anybody to hurt my child, but if correction is needed, allow us to do that, in the safest and the most productive way possible. So again, I thank you for this forum. It was fantastic, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well. That's the end. Oh, nope, we got one more. All right. I think what we should do here, Chair Carrillo, is since we're at 2:30, we'll take the final caller and then call off the public comment. So we'll start with Jackie or Jackie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. I'm Jackie Murillo. I'm with Young Women's Freedom Center. I actually grew up in juvenile hall. Hi, Shay. Hi. But I just really wanted to say something, because two things. One, I wanted to know, what if it doesn't pass inspection, right? Do you guys know exactly what you're going to do with the youth? Like, just move them to another facility, or is there any way that they're going to get lesser time, or if is anything going to happen where they could come to us that support them out here, right? Programs. And then another thing, the speaker before me said that probation officers are good, and I just want to share that, yes, because I had a good experience with them, and they were like, if you grow up in there, they were like my kind of like my support, right? And they were amazing, but it doesn't change the fact, it doesn't have to really do anything with them. It doesn't change the fact that that place leaves you a lot of trauma, and when you're really young, I mean, youth doesn't belong there anyway, But I just wanted to say that it's not about probation being bad people. It's just about the experiences that we end up having as children inside of there. But thank you.
Thank you for that, Jackie. And actually, I think that is a very good question that we should know the answer to. That Chief Fletcher actually alluded to some of the possibilities in her report. And I think that Dr. Reynoso and I can check in with Chief Fletcher and Lisa Southwell between now and the July 25th meeting to find out what the world of possibilities are with respect to those answers. So thanks for bringing that up. Back to you, Chair Carrillo.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you all for your time and comments. As a reminder, please be sure to follow us on social media at LA County POC. Also subscribe to our new YouTube channel by searching Probation Oversight Commission and click and subscribe. To receive reminders about our upcoming meetings, visit our website at poc.lacounty.gov. To subscribe to our email listing, it is now 2:33 p.m. and I adjourn this meeting. Thanks everyone, and stay cool.
Thank you.